Welcome to the FU Money Podcast. I'm Hugh.
And I'm Dane.
FU today, Dane.
FU today, Hugh.
Today we're joined with an awesome guest who is one of the most sophisticated investors that we know personally. He is an experimental Air Force engineer, or was. He's a house hacking his way to freedom. He is a whiz at AI and some other things. So we're going to get into that.
Well, and I will add that though he is of Italian heritage, he is sculpted like a Greek god, Dinas Valentinius, or as we like to know him as Dean. He is our honored guest in Missouri, in the HQ of things, the wild HQ, the hillbilly mansion is what we call it. And we have some questions for you if you want to jump into it, right?
Dean, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you both, and FU too as well to both of you.
I've been excited to say that. But super nice to have you. We like to jump in. So one of the things we always like to talk about is early childhood development, meaning around money. What was your childhood like? Were there discussions around money? Was it like a taboo, or what was it like growing up in your household?
Yeah, I'll be honest, it wasn't talked about a whole lot. I think I like to say that my parents kind of had the Dave Ramsey mentality upbringing. Okay. So they definitely instilled very deep sense of saving and frugality and, long-term vision for investments, which was awesome. And I think that put me on the right track early. Yeah. Monday morning quarterback, looking back and saying if I could have done one thing better, I kind of wish I got more of the investing side of things as opposed to just save, pay cash, don't get into debt. Because obviously, as we all know, there is good debt. There's a way you can really set yourself up well by using and leveraging that versus just trying to save for everything and pay off all your debts.
And I want to just kind of jump in there and ask a question. For some of the people listening might be wildly triggered at what you just said. There's a such thing as good debt. And I believe that as well. Can you just kind of go over just some of the high level stuff? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, it's funny you say that because it definitely triggers people often. And I just actually yesterday we were talking about this. I got into a good old fashioned internet discussion, air quotes, about, paying off debt versus never paying off debt. Mm-hmm. What do I mean by that? I classify good debt as anything that is returning you more than what you're paying in terms of the interest rate. Okay. So you can hear referred to as interest rate arbitrage, which means I'm maybe taking on debt at 5%, but I'm going and putting that money to work in some sort of investment, whether that's real estate, could be the stock market. It's not really one of my favorite vehicles, especially not as active income, but buying businesses, buying real estate, any cash flowing asset that you invest in. It could even be an example I like to make is you could go buy a camera. If you go buy a camera and you put it on a credit card at 10% interest, but you're using that camera for work and you're making 20% on your money because you're using that as income, as a job, that would be good debt in my opinion. So you're arbitraging the interest rates. You're getting more interest. You're getting 20% interest on your money that you're paying somebody 10% to borrow. So you're making 10%.
It's a unique way to look at it. I never thought about it in the camera example.
Right. And because most of the time you look at that, or even cars, right, as a depreciating asset, it's not, or a really liability. But if you go put your car on Turo and now you're making a whole bunch of money per month on it, and you only have a 3% car loan on it, could be profitable. Could be a good decision. Not always, but.
It kind of reminded me, there's a farmer. There's a story of a farmer. Well, actually, no, his name's Mark. And he was like, Hugh, if you do farming this way, you buy some cattle, then it's like a 600% return. But if you throw the cow on to a credit card and you do this at the end of the year when you sell it, he does rotational grazing, and then he doesn't overwinter. So he buys them in the spring when they're expensive, and he sells in the fall when the prices have tanked, but they put on 800 pounds. And the math went from like, you made 500% or whatever, to like 2,800%. Because technically he borrowed the credit card's money. He paid just the interest, which ended up being like $200. And at the end of the year, he got the cow paid for and the loan paid for. It's pretty crazy stuff.
Yeah.
So
would you say taking on good debt is almost like, let's relate it to a contractor, right? We're talking about blue collar people doing blue collar jobs. Mm-hmm. I need to invest in tools, Snap-on, whatever it is. This is an investment. It is debt to buy your arsenal of equipment. Though if you are getting a return on that is good debt placed somewhere where you were making money on that. This is another good example, maybe.
I think that's a great example. Yeah, and going back to the farmer example, I don't know too many farmers that can afford to purchase a brand new John Deere tractor in cash, right? So
Right.
they almost have to take on debt in order to continue to make money and be profitable. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so one thing I do want to get at right at the beginning, because we're talking about debt, you're saying good debt is anything where you're making more money than the debt's costing you. So one, you're bringing money in. I do want to highlight the difference, in my opinion. If you do buy equipment or you do buy a camera, that is not an asset. There is a difference between an asset and a liability. That is a tool, an equipment loan that helps you accomplish your job, meaning it's on the active income side, which I don't consider an asset. But again, this is more for the advanced folks. At the very beginning, it's okay to have some debt if you're using your debt to make money, and the debt doesn't cost you more.
Yeah, absolutely.
And one caveat, like that's not carte blanche for everybody to just go take debt,
Right.
even on assets, even on things that are producing money, because maybe that's not always the best way to do it. You just need to analyze and say, hey, is there a better way? Is there a more cost-effective way for me to acquire this tool or this asset that's producing money? And sometimes that's debt, sometimes it's paying cash for it, and sometimes there's other solutions.
Right.
Yeah, no, I love it. We're going to get back to the questions here, but the last part, and just to build on what you had just said was, and you see it often, okay, do you need to go buy the best camera that's out there? Or can you hop on Facebook Marketplace and instead of buying a $4,000 camera, buy 3 years ago $4,000 camera for $1,000? Maybe you can stomach that one with just cash, or buy used tools, or go buy the broken Craftsman and trade it in for a new one.
Right. And there's always a plus to being frugal in the type of debt that you acquire, which I think everyone in this room can appreciate. And a lot of our listeners appreciate. It doesn't mean go max it out on the best of the best. Get as good as you can possibly get for the money you're investing in it or putting into it. Right.
And if you're listening and following along, Dane had some investments that he's currently working on. He's got 4 houses going on right now. Go listen to our emergency fund episode. It's awesome. Even within that context of buying an asset, Dane's backing up and making sure it's really good. Okay, so back to the questions here. Money wasn't talked about a lot growing up. It was more Dave Ramsey. So first off, that's a huge advantage that you were taught that at all, because most people aren't.
Yep.
It seems to me, interacting, and maybe the viewers can already tell, that you're more of a hustler. Were you always a hustler? What kind of led to that culture difference?
Yeah, that was another upbringing culture thing, I guess, where, I mean, I was taught the value of hard work and putting in the effort and in order to kind of get those returns. So that was another thank you to my parents for really instilling that in me. I enjoy work.
But did your parents only work for other people, or were they entrepreneurs?
No, so my dad was, he did construction on his own at first. For most of my, at least like teenage to later years, they were both employed as salaried.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Cool. And so really the foundation was the Dave Ramsey method, which is so common, and it's a great place to start. And we talk about that a lot. There are things we 100% agree with to a certain point. And transitioning, I guess, to my next question is, what was the it moment or the pivot? Because you said, I learned about savings. I learned about the frugality. I learned about these things. I didn't learn much about investing. So what changed? Like, where did that take place to where you are now?
Yeah, it's funny because growing up and because of this foundation, really until, I was planning to pay cash for my first house. That was my goal.
Dude,
I was like, I'm not taking any debt, again, because of the whole like, that's bad. So I like to take things to the extreme. So I'm like, all right, I'm never taking on a loan about anything. Buy a car in cash, buy a house in cash. And then kind of by extension, I was terrified I saw and heard some people, you can buy a house and rent it out and you have a rental property, buy a couple, be a landlord, build a rental portfolio. And I was like, what happens if my tenant stops paying? Oh my God, like this just did not compute. So really, I guess until I saw other people doing it and kind of learned from that, I was like, oh, well, they can do it. Why can't I do it? What's the difference here? And then really got a better feel for what a realistic level of risk is. Because you always hear people say, well, what if your tenant just stops paying you? It's like, okay, well, what's the likelihood? What's the actual real world likelihood that it happens? Let's do a little research, find out because we have so much data right now in our world, in our lives. We can investigate these things and we can say, okay, what, out of 3 million tenants in the United States. How many default? And, what do you do if one defaults? So just seeing other people doing it and saying, oh, maybe this is possible. And then going down the rabbit hole of, okay, what is the actual risk, the real risk? Not what you hear on the news, what you hear on the headlines, not what your uncle said about his bad experience with his rental property. So seeing other people doing it, Bigger Pockets was a big kick in the pants for me, big educational factor for me. So,
well, you bring up a super important point. Everyone has an opinion, and a lot of them aren't correct, and a lot of them are negative.
Yep.
And you're like, hey, we have data. Dean is a data guy. If there's one thing I applaud you on, it's you will search out the data. And like you said, you understand the risk involved in what you're getting into. You do research. And we have all that now. And instead of just listening to someone who's like, I wouldn't do this, or I wouldn't do that, or, oh, this is how you do it. Dean's the guy who's like, well, I'm actually going to look into this and see what's possible. How often do your tenants not pay? Let's portion that out in like a statistical sense where you can understand the risk you're getting into. So don't just listen to anyone, especially when it comes to real estate. Don't even just listen to us. Like, go out there, do some research, understand what you're getting into, but know your data, and don't just listen to your uncle.
And real quick,
unless he's rich.
To jump in on this, maybe listen to your uncle.
Yeah,
exactly that. So Dean said it. Dane kind of was beating around the bush around it. When you're taking advice from people, including us, if you are, don't listen to internet strangers, but if you are, do your own research. Make sure they've done the thing, right? Maybe listen to your uncle who did lose everything and figure out why that was. Maybe you're in California, you're like, heck no, I'm not going to rent to anyone in California. The laws are all against me. That's great. Do your research. Hey, I know lots of people. Make sure you're listening to people. We've said real estate many times already. Remember, this is a financial podcast. If you're talking about an options trader guy, make sure you're talking to someone who didn't just, I tried it once, I lost everything. This is what I do all day, every day, months and months. This is how I do it. Yeah, take advice from that guy.
Yeah.
If it's real estate, same thing. Take advice from the people who've done it for you. Not just the people who have your best interest, right? Your mom probably has your best interest at heart. But if you want to be an MMA boxer, you're probably going to want to hire a boxing coach.
I have a funny story about that sometimes.
To get you towards your goals, right? Both your coach and your mom have the same interests, but one's advice may or may not be valid.
One's going to take you to the title. The other is just going to make you feel good for showing up and trying your best.
Dean, you do a lot of data. You said this where we love data. What is one of your favorite tracking tools right now for, let's just do personal finance as one leg, and then I know you're real estate heavy, so maybe real estate tracking for the second leg.
Sure. Yeah. On the personal side, I'm old school. I use an Excel spreadsheet that I built, budget tracker that I use, and I fill in manually. Advantages and disadvantages to that. You can automate that to a certain extent with, linking some accounts, APIs, and automation, which is great. Pulling statements from your bank account, et cetera. I find that spending the half hour to an hour per month, which is not a lot, helps me better digest and internalize exactly where everything's going. I can look at every single transaction, and I've found a lot of stuff that I'm either forgot I was paying for, subscriptions, and there's other tools to, again, automate that. But I found, false expenses, fraudulent expenses, or just shit that wasn't supposed to be there. And that helps me with that. And it also helps me just say, oh, wow, like, okay, I really take it home and say, oh, I'm spending how much on, energy drinks every month? Holy crap. Okay. So whereas if it just automated and I was just looking at the categories, I may not come to the same conclusions. I may not realize it or be able to look into it as deeply.
So I love that. Dean, you're an advanced investor. If there's a tool for it, Dean knows about it or has at least researched it. And yet you still choose in this aspect to manage it through an Excel spreadsheet that you built, and some of it's manual. And everyone thinks you got to automate everything and let other smarter, whether it's AI or anything, do it all for us. But I will say that's not always the best route. And you got to understand why that is or why that isn't. So I think that's really cool that you still do an Excel tracking sheet for yourself.
And I recommend everybody starts there. Yeah. The reason I say that is as a computer engineer, like that's one of the kind of precepts that we were taught is you need to be able to do this manually first. Like we started by programming in assembly language. We started at the very base level, the very basics. Does anybody really use that nowadays? No, because it's not as efficient, but it helped us understand the underlying concepts. The same is true for anything, budgeting, real estate, whatever. Do it yourself, do it manually, learn it intimately, and then move on to the automated tools, the advanced tools, the streamlined tools that are high level and breeze over a lot of the details because you know the details, you know what's happening behind the scenes. So that's my approach, that's my recommendation. But
that's awesome. It gives you clarity, insight. It gives you hands-on ability to, like you said, you found false transactions, all these things that sometimes a system will just categorize and then just track or overlook. Especially early on, every expense matters and every incorrect expense costs you. Love that. I mean, my wife and I still use a same kind of thing for our personal finances. She created this awesome budget and has the way to update it and track it, but we do money dates every week and we're always looking at that just to hopefully, and it's helped us realize we were doing a lot of the wrong things where a system might just track it, like I said, and send it on down the line. So
yeah, I absolutely love that. So with the same thing, we're noticing a trend here, talking to a lot of people who are really good about their money. The tool doesn't matter as much as that they're doing something.
Yeah.
And a lot of the people just go back to the fundamentals, which is an Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah. I even used to, for the longest time, do a paper diagram where I would draw certain columns that I needed and I'd have it all listed out, and it was easy to replicate in under 5 minutes. And I'd do it monthly. This is before I got married, and my finances were never cleaner and simpler. And then that all spins out of control. Not because I have a wife and child, no. But at the end of the day, it was so simple that it worked for me. And now we use more advanced systems, and it was harder in the beginning. So, I mean, even pencil and paper really work effectively if you're just doing something in one.
I remember episode 2 or 3 with Mindy Jensen. That's what she did too.
Yeah, that's right.
Mindy just wrote it down,
killing it
in a journal notebook, number 2 journal notebook, spiral notebook. That was hers.
This leads us to one of my favorite questions. What is your favorite wealth building vehicle that you use today?
I guess that kind of has a 2-part answer.
Okay.
So my favorite wealth building vehicle that I have utilized firsthand to get me to this point has been real estate.
Okay.
And specifically just buy and hold, some rehab, but buy and hold, long-term real estate, and house hacking has been the most powerful component of that. I have both house hacked personal properties and then also acquired small multifamily as purely investment properties that I've never lived in. So I've done both sides of that. The one that has had by far the most, but by and large, what has had the most significant impact on getting me to financial freedom quickly. By quickly, I mean like a couple of years, which I could not have done through just purely investment properties unless I was flipping them or wholesaling or doing something much more active, is house hacking.
Yeah.
So what house hacking is, for those who aren't familiar, is all it is buying a home as your primary residence and renting out some portion of that. So you can buy a duplex, you can buy a triplex, you can buy a quadplex. Those are all considered personal residences. Live in one unit, rent out the others. That's easier. It's more convenient. You don't have to share roommates. You don't have to share living spaces. But it's not going to be as profitable because there's a sliding scale between profitability and convenience. So the more convenient it is for you, the less profitable it's going to be on average.
Right. But some component of wealth building is also lessening expenses, and your housing typically is the largest expense in any one of our day-to-day lives.
Right.
So by house hacking, and for our viewers and listeners, you've heard every guest talk about house hacking. So it is something that many, many people do and do successfully, and even myself included. A duplex is what stepped me into real estate and got me to where I'm at today. So
how much money did it cost for you to get into house hacking?
Oh, good one.
Well, okay, I cheated. I have the VA loan as the military, so I got into my first house hack for about $2,000.
It's not cheating because you had to serve to get it.
That's true. That's true.
There's a sacrifice involved.
But for those who don't have that advantage, you're still able to get in for 3.5% down with an owner-occupied loan. So I mean, depending on your market, but you're talking 10 grand, maybe 20 grand if you live in an expensive market. You can also have a lot of those closing costs paid for by the seller if you have a good realtor and you structure your negotiations well. So,
well, on that note, there was a guy I met, and this is before I knew anything about real estate. When I was younger, I was dating a Korean girl, and so she had friends who were coming to the United States, and they needed housing. And there was a guy that we ran into. He was renting a room, and he rented every room to international students. They pay higher, they're more stable income, they're cleaner, they share space, but it's a safer bet than just some rando roommate. A lot of people don't talk about that, think about that. You contact universities, you contact these programs, they need housing that's dedicated to student housing, and the host lives on site. So it's safer for everyone involved. And this guy, he's like, oh, I've paid my house off, I live rent free. And he just had all of his ducks in a row. And I was like, wow, that guy's pretty smart. And this was when I was like in my 20s and I didn't know anything about that. I was like, oh, that's probably a really good idea. I should have done something like that. Now we're all talking about house hacking. I was like, that guy's a genius. It was before bigger pockets, before anything. He just figured it out. But that's a good way to go.
Gene, there's one thing I want to push back on against something you said from the customer or from the listener's point of view. It's some people are going to say, okay, great. You guys are Americans. Oh, and you're in the Midwest. Sure, I'll go buy a fourplex. But I am special. I live in a high cost of living area like Chicago or Denver, or I live in Canada, or I live in outskirts of London. I can't buy a fourplex. What do you say to people who's in a high cost of living area with that limiting mindset?
Yeah.
And have any experience with this?
Yeah. First of all, thanks for the loaded question. First of all, as far as the mindset goes, like, stop making excuses. That's all I can say. Extreme ownership, like, there's always a solution. Find it. Either you want it badly enough or you're going to make an excuse. So figure it out. There's always a way. And high cost of living areas are actually often better for house hacking because rents are higher and there's more demand, right?
Yep.
So you think about a city like San Francisco or New York City, the demand for affordable housing is much greater than, like, say, the Midwest, for example.
Yeah.
So you're able to rent out rooms and people are willing to pay for them and pay a good premium for them. So yes, my experience in Denver, which is, not the most expensive city in the country, but it's up there. It's up there. It's top 5 or top 10 for sure. My house hacks there have been much better than say my one in Northwest Florida, which is much more kind of rural area. And it's even by 2 military bases. So I had that advantage going for me in terms of tenants. But yeah, my experience with high cost of living house hacks they're great and they work really, really well. The other nice thing about higher cost areas, when the rent's higher, look at your ratio. Look at your rent to mortgage ratio or your rent to income ratio. Those are the things that are going to tell you kind of your trade space. But typically when your rents are higher, your expenses are a lower percent of your income. So it actually works out better for me with my properties in Denver versus my properties in the Midwest, because when I have to replace a water heater, it's a little bit more expensive in Denver, but it's not twice as expensive. But guess what? My income is twice as much.
Yeah. So
it's a lower percentage. My, $1,000 water heater replacement is 30% of my rental income in Denver, whereas it's 120% of my rental income in Dayton, Ohio.
Absolutely.
So it hurts a lot more and it takes a lot longer to recoup that expense. And water heaters don't last longer in Dayton, so it happens about the same frequency.
Well, and my biggest argument to people who are like, I live in an expensive market, I say you actually have a greater advantage. You have more hospitals. I'm talking traveling nurses, traveling medical professionals. You have 10x compared to what we have in the Midwest that need housing, and they don't, even with their stipends that they're given from a lot of these institutions, they don't have enough to rent a 2-bedroom. But a single bedroom with other traveling nurses, and you're not just talking about school or hospitals, you're talking about schools, you're talking about people, like I said, international students, people that are better renters that will stay longer and pay a premium, and you have a lot bigger advantage in a Chicago, New York, or a Denver.
Yeah, and beyond that, even your expectations are just different.
Yeah.
So out here in Springfield, people expect more so to have their own house.
Yes.
Especially if they're a family.
Big time.
In cities, nobody is jaded enough to go to a city and say, I'm not going to live in an apartment.
Yeah.
It's pretty much commonplace, at least if you're like downtown in most big cities.
Right.
So people are already expecting, I may have to share a space. I may have to be in a shared common area, in an apartment setting versus a single family home. So again, it's just easier to get over. You have fewer objections.
I could see that.
And I love that your bottom line was stop making an excuse for yourself.
Spoken like a military man.
I'm going to say this because the 3 of us in this room on this podcast right now, stop making excuses and start making it happen. And going back to your sliding scale of comfort. So on one end, you have super comfort, low, probably investment, low, like your life's miserable, but you're living paycheck to paycheck. And then on the other end, you have uncomfortable and hustle and whatever. And there's definitely everyone's somewhere on that scale. But if you are wanting financial independence, are you also comfortable? Are you also blowing all your money on the things you want? You go buy that video game or that gun or
Cocktails.
whatever you want.
Cocktails.
Yeah. Do you go out drinking on the weekends constantly? The answer is that's fine. But if you're simultaneously frustrated where you're at financially and you're trying to live in that comfort side, that's on you. And the world isn't going to tell you. We're telling you, but no one cares about you. Only you care about you. Stop making an excuse. If you want to do something, go do it.
Yeah. And it will be hard. I fully agree with what you guys are saying. At some point, you just have to decide, and you will sacrifice a lot. And that's an episode for a different day. What sacrifice it took for maybe us, or even you and I, Hugh, as hosts, to start the process or get where we're at, or the challenges we face. And Dean, certainly you faced so many along your way to becoming who you are and how you invest and how you analyze properties. But more importantly, I wanted to not pass the question, what is your favorite wealth building tool now? Because you're moving into a new direction. I want to talk about your small business acquisition and what like put the target on that, because you were real estate heavy. And now like you and your partner, Rocky, are just, I read all your newsletters and emails. So I'm like, man, these guys understand business acquisition so well. And it's something I hope to move into at one point. So I don't want to skip over on that. Can you talk about that for a second?
Yeah. First, real quick, I just want to piggyback off what he was talking about. I do want to throttle back a little bit and just make it clear to everybody that like, we're not talking about pain and suffering for years on end. Like nobody's saying you have to be miserable to achieve financial freedom. Like I freaking bought a new truck in 2018. That was before I was financially free. I was still investing. I was still on my path to freedom, but I'm not making huge sacrifices. Like I'm not miserable. I'm not, holed up in my basement for, never leave, never go out to dinner, never have a cocktail with friends, never spend on a vacation. Nobody is saying that. Like that is not at all what you have to do in order to. Now, if you choose to go to the extreme, you're going to get there faster. It is, again, it's a sliding scale.
Right.
But just minor, I hesitate to even call them sacrifices. Get a roommate.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is not, let's put things in perspective here. There are people that do not have running water, that have to walk a mile to get water to come back every single day or twice a day for their village, right? Like we have running water, we have indoor plumbing, we are, we have fast food. Like these are not sacrifices in the grand scheme of things. But just get a little uncomfortable, maybe question what society has placed as norms for us and say like, what, does this really matter to me? Mm-hmm. Figure out the things that really matter to you. That's the most important part and make those a priority. And if that's living alone, like I chose to be a little bit less profitable on my house hacks because I like my privacy. So instead of getting rent by the room strategy and renting out every single room and having a bunch of roommates and a bunch of shared spaces, I got a single family home that I could turn into essentially a duplex and create like 2 separate units. Mm-hmm. And that allowed me to maintain my privacy, but still be profitable and still build wealth on the house hacking front.
That's awesome.
So find what's important to you and find how to make it happen.
That's great advice.
Business acquisition.
Yes, sir.
So that was, I kind of alluded to it earlier when I said there's 2 different, approaches to how I like to build wealth. As I just separated from active duty Air Force, I guess 5 months ago now at the end of 2023. And with that, I lost, pretty healthy 6-figure salary. So how do I replace that? And Rocky, my business partner, he's in the same boat. He's separating in a couple months here, and we're both, he has a family, so he has even more, more pressure to replace that income and maintain the quality of life that they're accustomed to. So real estate's great, but the one thing it doesn't do, unless you're super active in it, like flipping, wholesaling, et cetera, which is a full-time job, can be in and of itself,
definitely,
is get you a lot of income very quickly. It's great for long-term wealth building, but it doesn't replace especially large salaries right away, typically. So we said, okay, what else does? What's another good investing strategy that we can look into that we believe in? And we found business acquisition or business buying. We look at small businesses for sale, and then there are loan products out there. Most notably, the SBA 7A is one of the biggest ones that can help you borrow money to acquire a leveraged buyout to acquire these businesses, and then you just take it over and run it. There you go.
And if you truly want to know like pro tips and really great strategies on even looking at businesses, how can they look up your newsletter, website? Please share some information, because it was enlightening for me. I was like, whoa, I love this.
I appreciate it. I'm glad to hear you're getting a lot out of it.
Yeah.
For the older newsletters that we've already released, you can just go to clearedforacquisition.com. And those, we're starting to upload kind of blog style some of the previous newsletters for people who haven't been
You
subscribed.
said clearedforacquisitions.com.
Cleared for acquisition.
Acquisition.
.com. Yep.
It'll be in the show notes.
Yes, we'll put it in the notes. And but if you want to get every week, we have right away, get the immediate newsletter popping into your inbox. We clearedforacquisition.com/subscribe. And there's a sign up form there.
Sweet. That one is a must have if you even remotely are interested in looking to buy businesses and not make all the wrong choices. The things that I've learned just on listening to you and Rocky talk, or just from the newsletter, I was like, oh yeah, I would have definitely sunk the ship on that one. So there was a few that just, like I said, if that is your road that you're going down now, even if you've done it before, you'll get so much value out of it. But on top of that, if you're interested in it, it will set my interest, really whet my appetite. I was like, oh, I want to do this at some point.
Yeah, and we're just kind of documenting our journey and our lessons learned at this point to hopefully help other people, like you said. We also try to provide tips for current business owners, and that includes real estate investors, because that's a business as well, in terms of how to run your business more efficiently, tips and tool tips and AI tools and automation and business operations, advice that we found works well for us.
All the good stuff.
Kind of a mix of all that.
And we at Small Biz Rescue, the sister podcast to FU Money, actually just did an interview with Rocky, who is Dean's partner, and Dean for 18 Alpha Investing. And go watch that episode, because there's a lot of myths. People are like, oh, you're buying businesses? Okay, well, I'm tuning out because I don't have $1 million to buy that.
Yeah.
No, normal people, very, very normal. 90% of businesses are sold directly to the next generation from the owner carrying it. We'll talk about that more in a future episode, because there's so much to that.
Yeah, it's very accessible, to your point, more than I ever imagined.
Would you want to buy a business because it makes money? That's what a business is designed to do.
I mean, yeah, that's the primary driver. I'm not wealthy enough to do whatever I want if it doesn't make money just yet.
Interesting. So you're not wealthy enough to do whatever you want. So you're going to buy something that makes you money.
So I can do whatever I want.
So you can do whatever you want.
I love that. Well, sweet, Dean. I appreciate you kind of diving into some of those areas and sharing with the audience and the viewers some of the things that you're interested in, where you came from. I like to ask, one of my favorite money questions is what is your biggest irrational fear around money?
Ooh, biggest irrational fear around money. I don't think this is that irrational.
Okay.
But the collapse of the dollar.
Ooh, that could be quite rational. We don't know.
I think it's still a little irrational right now, but you never know. I mean, right? We've had more weird crap going on in the past couple of years than probably any of us expected. Yep. So it might not be that far outlandish. But.
I mean, people in Russia didn't see it coming, and they had wheelbarrows full of rubles or whatever it was that was almost worthless.
Yep.
And these are big societies like ours, big economies. And when it happens so fast, people just are caught with their pants down, basically. So it's not irrational in my point of view, but it's frightening to think what the implication would be.
Yeah. Luckily, they had vodka as a backup currency.
So right.
they're fine. They're just trading in vodka right now.
They'll find a way.
Yeah.
And my brother-in-law is Russian, so he tells me the craziest stories and of hardships over there, and just how their economies had to adjust and recover, and how politics play into that. So anyway,
Gabriel Peruski?
I don't speak it. All I know is Nastarovia, which is cheers or welcome. Anyway,
cheers.
Nastarovia. Yeah, Nastarovia.
I only know the bad words in Russian.
Yeah, which is all you need.
Next, uncomfortable money question. If you were to get in an accident right now, you couldn't leave this. You couldn't move. You couldn't talk. You couldn't blink to communicate.
Couldn't work out. How
long would your business or family survive and make it?
Luckily, I think there's not much that I couldn't do. The blinky talky, Stephen Hawking
voice box.
Yeah. So luckily, a lot of the stuff that I do is A, remote, and B, can be done by a computer. So I don't think it would have that big of an impact, to be honest.
You're in a coma at this point, is what I'm saying.
Oh, coma. Okay, all right, that's different.
You're incapacitated.
Well, that's one of the benefits of having a partner. Is sucks for Rocky, but he'd pick up the slack on a lot of the jointly owned.
And he's a good guy.
Yeah,
he would do
he's
it.
A great guy.
That's a good point.
Yep.
Partner well.
One of the benefits of having a partner, right? And that would, obviously, we kind of joke, but like that would suck for him. It's probably not sustainable long term because we do both have a role in the business. But in terms of, to answer your second question, that is one of our goals for this year, is to make our real estate side of our portfolio much more passive. I don't believe it's ever possible to be 100% passive, but we can get 99 point something percent, hopefully. So that's one of our goals, is trying to get that more passive. And what that looks like is setting up systems in place, processes, and then having folks who are third party who manage those systems and processes, whether that's a VA, a property manager, or those types of folks.
Well, and with that question, Hugh, I didn't think about this much because we've all partnered with people on different things, but I've never had the partnership conversation of, if I happen to be injured or handicapped, we have the death clause in all of our legal stuff, but never once, what would happen in the event that I just couldn't work anymore? How would we run this? And what does that look like? So that might be something to explore and think through as you partner in the future with people. Talk to an attorney about it, because that is a hard thing to leave someone else running the ship when there was 2 active roles and now one of those people is gone.
And this can even be brought down to a personal level. You're talking to your spouse, if you're married. What happens if one of you is incapacitated? So have you had those conversations? Who's going to take care of the kids? Who's going to get the kids to where? Food for thought. We always like to ask the uncomfortable money question. Hopefully get you thinking.
Yeah. It makes me think of something different every time. I want to put that into like some of my legal on my OAs and stuff. Jeez. Okay. So I like to know, what is one thing you wish your younger self knew starting on this journey, if you could tell that person?
Yeah, that's easy. I wish I had more of the investing mindset earlier. I wish I got started house hacking earlier.
Oh yeah.
That's a huge one. This is a dangerous one because it's almost like trying to maximize, and I don't want people to get the wrong takeaway from this, but I almost wish I had invested less in like retirement accounts and stuff earlier. I always got kudos for that from people. They're like, "Oh my God, I can't believe at 18 you're investing in your retirement account, an IRA already, in a 401k already." And I think, again, it's taken by itself, it's very positive. So like, invest in something. Get started. You're not wrong by investing early.
Wow. Yeah.
But if I could go back and do it over again, knowing what I know now, I probably would have put less or nothing into retirement accounts and put a lot more into more higher risk and higher leverage assets or investments, such as real estate, house hacking, even my education, learning more, going to conferences, taking courses, getting a mentor, stuff like that. I'm confident, unless I really royally screwed it up, that it would have paid exponentially higher dividends than what's in my retirement account right now.
That's such an interesting perspective. At some point, I want to have you back and dive into what that would have looked like and really the benefits of, like you said, mentorship, investing in education outside of your traditional 4-year universities, and areas in which you could have, because you're right, there's the traditional road, 401k, your traditional vehicles, and you did the smart thing, but what would have been more advantageous knowing what you know now, and how, when you said you'd be so much further ahead. And I'm assuming you've kind of thought through this, analyzed why that is, and it'd just be really good to dive deep on that at some other point.
Well, I love it too, because this is where the point kind of diverges with the Dave Ramsey crowd, because they're going to say, oh, no debt, no debt, no debt. Work until you die. Maybe at age 80, you might have enough to retire, based on the strategy he's outlining, which is invest onto your taxable accounts and your tax advantage accounts. So I love that you're saying, hey, there's something else. And I was kind of like that too. I was join corporate America, invest in your 401k. This is what you're supposed to do. And later I figured out, oh, there's something else I should be doing. And
can I give a hot take real quick? Traditional retirement strategy does not work anymore for our generation. Period. Dot.
Definitely further episode. That's a powerful.
Is traditional retirement dead? That should be one.
Yeah, I would say a yes, 100%.
Okay.
Huge.
So that's my assertion.
Because I didn't go that route.
If people want to have a discussion, question me on it, Spears, I welcome it. I love to talk about that stuff. So that's my assertion for everybody out there. And like, even if you don't agree with me on that, look into it. Like, please do run the numbers for yourself and see if you think I'm wrong or if you think it works for you. But for everybody that isn't sure, like, question that, because I'm a big believer that we're going to be people who are still subscribed to that, mentality, I think are going to be in a lot of trouble 40 years from now when they're looking to retire and they're like, oh crap, I can't.
I like that you brought up Spears, because how can people get a hold of you, like give you opposing views, connect with you, just, buy you a drink? What's the best way to get a hold of Dean?
Probably most active on Instagram. So at the Dean of Wealth is my handle.
Solid.
Also at 18 Alpha Investing, 18 Alpha Investing. That's our business account on there. Again, we talk more about like business side, some of the real estate stuff, business acquisition and business operations. And then on mine, it's a little bit more like finance and AI and dogs and stuff. So.
Deep into AI. Dean, we didn't talk a lot about it, but you have like really taught some amazing stuff on AI tools and what that can do to scale businesses, leverage more productivity. So again, I think there's just more to talk about at some point. We'd love to have you back and get into some of these great things that truly make or break the future of investing and how we run our businesses and the way that the world is just going to work, whether we like it or not. You can either fight change like I do, don't do that, or be like Dean and embrace change. And that's why Dean is Denis Valentinius.
Be on the top edge.
The man, the myth, the legend.
What is one actionable step that the listeners can take and immediately implement to get them closer to financial independence?
Depends what stage you're at, man. That's such a tough question. I want to give like 10 different answers depending on where you're at in your journey. But I'll try to keep it.
Newbie.
I'll try to. Okay, so this is actually, that applies well to newbies. Probably best to newbies is education. Go educate yourself. Okay. Take a course, even if it's a free course. YouTube University. Like, there's so much information out there. It doesn't have to be it probably shouldn't be a $30,000, boot camp, full on guru course. Probably just go get started listening to, I keep saying bigger pockets. Like, that's how I got started. So I have a soft spot, but follow podcasts like this, follow accounts that resonate with you, that look like they've done, or are where you're trying to get to.
Right.
So just start educating yourself and putting together a game plan. And this is two things. I can't focus, but like, identify your goals. Really, that's the bigger thing. Yeah. What do your goals look like? Because your action steps look vastly different if your goal is to get to $40,000 a year and be a nomad and travel the world, or just travel around in an RV, or if you want a private jet, right? Like, those are two very different paths, and you're going to need to start taking very different steps today if you want to get to one versus the other.
Well, and to like bring something up from earlier, use the data, understand the risk with whatever path that you take. That would be with all that education comes tools. Analysis is part of that.
And I don't think that Dean even knows or listened to the second episode, but the second episode that we have is where to start. And a big thing is identify your values and what you want in a life. And this is not staged or anything like that. And we're just sharing with you the things that we see in a lot of successful people. So the last one is there any last advice that you'd like our listeners to know about before we end the show?
Man, I'll just go back and harp on the extreme ownership front. Like, just if you find yourself making excuses or having negative self-thought or mentality of, I can't do this, I promise you can. You may be starting at a worse off spot than somebody else, but there are always examples of people who started off way worse with way more unfair disadvantages than you're at, and they are now, wildly successful. So don't sell yourself short. That's it. Don't have the negative self-talk or negative mindset. And really, like, it sounds cliche and woo-woo, which you guys both know me. That's the furthest thing from what I am, but it's true. Like, if you believe it, if you have the right mindset, you can get there.
I love that. Well, Dean, honestly, thank you so much. And for all of our viewers, listeners, any questions you have, Hugh and I love to get questions. We put a pause on that for this episode because we have a guest, but anything that we can dive further into or you're interested in, and feedback, only positive, we will take into consideration. And
I'll take all the negative. Send that all my way. I love
send
it.
the Spears to
I feed
Dean.
on that shit.
And that way we can grow the show and provide the value that we need continuously. But it's always been exciting to do more and more episodes. We have lots more guests coming ahead and lots more episodes with very specific content towards people that are looking to build better lives, better value, and make more money.
Super exciting stuff, guys. Remember, we'll listen to every feedback we read and every bit of it, and let us know what you want. We're going to guide this around what you guys are looking for. So we'll see you next time. Woo! Thanks for having me.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, Hugh and I really, really try to deliver value in these episodes. So if you learned something, you thought something was funny, you enjoyed a guest, please hop on to wherever it's being hosted, whether that's Spotify or Apple, and drop us a 5-star review. If it's anything lower than that, email us separately. We may or may not respond, but at least all of the things that we did right, let us know. And truly, if we did anything wrong, or if there's guests that you want to see, we aim to please, and you just want to be a guest on the podcast, how can they get a hold of us?
If you want to be a guest or ask us any questions, you can email fumoney@hughcarnahan.com and let us know. Again, we read every comment that comes our way. We actually have 2 or 3 super exciting ideas for shows that have already come our way. Again, we appreciate everything, guys. Remember, real quick, we are not experts at anything. This is not financial advice. Make sure you do your own due diligence. We are for entertainment and educational purposes. Don't listen to random strangers on the internet. We hope to share our message to get it as far as we can to normal, everyday folks, blue-collar folks, military folks. This is information that all of us should have. And so if you liked it, please share it. Guys, we will see you in the next episode. Woo!